Hello everyone. If you've been watching everything on my channel for the last few months, you've probably seen my playthrough of Portal Reloaded. If you've been watching everything on my channel and haven't seen my playthrough of Portal Reloaded, something's gone wrong. But in any case, we'll deal with that later. Possible timeline shenanigans, we'll figure it out. So anyways, I thought I'd give some of my summary thoughts on Portal Reloaded and give a kind of general review of the game. I won't be reviewing every aspect of it here. I'll be focusing a bit on the physics, but I hope to give you some of my final thoughts now that I've had time to digest the game. So, first of all, what is Portal Reloaded? So, Portal Reloaded is a fan-made mod of Portal 2. It was developed by Jonas Brinkman. Hopefully I pronounced that right. It features the same basic portal mechanics you have in Portal 2, along with the addition of a new time portal, with new puzzles centered around it and a loose story to tie things together. The game is 100% free as long as you own Portal 2 on Steam. All you have to do is search for Portal Reloaded on Steam, then download, install, and play. No fussing about to manually mod your copy of Portal 2, so don't worry if you're not too technically inclined. If you can install a game on Steam, you can play Portal Reloaded, and if you already own Portal 2, you can play Portal Reloaded for free. So, as this game is a mod of Portal 2, I'm not going to focus on aspects of the game that were just copied over from Portal 2, like the basic physics engines or graphics. Instead, I'm going to be focusing on the new aspects. And given it's my specialty, I'll also be giving particular focus to the implementation of physics in the mod, again, the new stuff in particular, but I'll also be discussing my general experiences with Portal Reloaded. So, let's get into the review. First, let's talk about the physics in the game. So, Portal Reloaded uses a physics engine carried over from the base game, including basically a standard physics engine, which you see in many games these days with portals added. So, as in the base game of Portal 2, objects can go through these portals, coming out somewhere else while retaining their speed relative to the portal. Light also goes through the portal, letting you see what's on the other side without going through. The game also carries over many devices used for puzzles, such as cubes, switches, lasers, turrets, etc. I'm not going to discuss the physics of these devices as they're all unchanged from the base game. And as its key feature in Portal Reloaded, it implements a new time travel portal, which transports the portal to the version of the world 20 years in the future or back to the present. Whereas the normal portals, I say normal in strong quotation marks, there appear as extended ellipses in either blue or orange. The time travel portal is a green square, and there's only one of it to make it stand out very distinctly from the other two. Now, when you go through this one time portal, what happens is basically the world flips 180 degrees as if you turn around in place while traveling through time. So imagine you put a time portal on the wall behind me. When you walk into it, it would be as if you instantaneously turn around and then you're 20 years in the future. Or going back, you turn around, you're 20 years back in the past, or the present, from the original perspective. Now, time travel like this is, of course, unrealistic from a real-world physics perspective. It basically can't happen. But I'm not going to complain about that. This mechanic is what's called a necessary weasel trope. I think it's a play on necessary evil. I'm not sure where the term came from. But basically, this trope is something that's a break from reality. It's something unrealistic, but the whole story hinges on it. Like an example is Superman. In order to have the story of Superman, you need to have some being that comes from an alien planet who's an immigrant metaphor and is ultra good, ultra moral, and ultra powerful. And having all of that is unrealistic, but you don't have the story of Superman without it, so it's pointless to complain at the very foundations of the story. And similarly in Portal Reloaded, you don't have the game if you don't have portals And in particular, you don't have Portal Reloaded the mod if you don't have a time travel portal. So there's really no point about complaining it. I'm not going to complain about the fact that it does exist. But we can still talk about its implementation and how that relates to real-world physics to, help understand a bit about how things work in the real world, why this doesn't work. But don't take any of my talk about this as being criticism about the way the game implements physics. There's maybe one point I'll criticize, but we'll get to that later. So, first of all, let's talk about how the time portal is implemented. That is, you only have one time portal, and when you go through, things flip around 180 degrees. Now, if you were designing a game like this from scratch, you might think of different ways you could put it in time portals. Like, your first thought might be, well, what if I have two portals, like the same blue and orange pair, but you also go through time? Well, this would be 4 portals total. It's a bit more complicated. And there's one other complication. Like, let's say you're in the present, you shoot one portal, the blue time travel portal, and then in the future, you're going to come out the orange time travel portal, but you haven't set that up yet. So the question is, do you set it up orange in the present and you'll come out there in the future? Okay, that could work. The portal will last, take the long way to the future. What about coming back? You can't affect where the portal is coming back. You could change one of the entrances. You see, there are extra complications if you add the second portal. Maybe you could find a way to make it work, but one portal where it'll be in the same place and present and future does simplify things. Now, let's talk about the other aspect. Why does it cause you to flip around the world when you go through it? Why not just walk through it to go from the present to the future? Well, let's think again about that. If the portal is set up in the middle of the room where there's nothing, walking through it works fine, but the game is based around a portal gun. How do you shoot a gun so that the portal lands in the middle of the room where there's nothing? You can't really tell the gun to stop there. It has to land on a wall. And so if it lands on a wall, do you always have to go through to the other side of the wall? That's going to cause some big limitations for puzzle designs. Every wall you put a time portal on has to have something accessible on the other side of it. So flipping things around when you go through solves all of these problems and also has some neat applications. Like if you put a time portal on the floor, you can drop something into it. It'll go through in the present, then in the future, it'll bounce back up, go up, and fall back down. And then in the present, go up, fall back down. And so you can get things just kind of bouncing between the two time periods indefinitely, which is a cool application that it takes advantage of in a few puzzles. So from a game design perspective, I think this is probably the best choice for adding a time portal. It's only one extra portal to manage. It doesn't require weird game design where you'd have to shoot a portal in the middle of the room or go through a wall, and you can take advantage of it by bouncing things down and up. So yeah, I think this is a good way to go about it from a game design perspective. Now, from a physics perspective, how would that work? Well, portals are essentially wormholes, which surprisingly could work in the real world. Not quite how they're portrayed in-game. The issue is the mouth of either wormhole is going to have a gravity around it. You'll feel distinct suckage or repulsion. Yes, suckage, that's a real term. Trust me, don't look it up. Suckage is a real term. And you don't really feel that in-game. There is a bit of hand-holding adjustment around portals, but it's not really the same as gravity. And there will also be space within it, which you don't see in-game. And it's also impossible to create a wormhole. That's one of the quirks. They can exist, but you can't create one. You just have to rely on something having been formed early in the universe and then inflated up. It's a whole big, ridiculously impossible thing that wormholes technically can exist, but that doesn't mean they will. And so the creating wormholes, yeah, that's impossible. Time travel wormholes, yeah. There are a few ideas about using wormholes for time travel, but as physicists got a better understanding of quantum gravity, it turns out that they'll basically collapse in on themselves. So we're not getting time travel wormholes, it doesn't seem. However, using wormholes for time travel is another matter. There are some relativity tricks you can do that might allow time travel with wormholes. If you're fortunate enough to find not just one wormhole, but multiple wormholes, and remember, even one is next to impossible. So you have to find multiple wormholes aligned in exactly the right way to allow you to do some relativity tricks that would maybe allow you to travel back in time. Though physicists are just kind of shaking their heads and saying, nah, it's not going to happen. So again, it's the necessary weasel trope. You don't have the game without it, but I'm just talking about how it would be in physics. So no real criticism there. So anyways, let's talk about how the game functions with time travel. So you've got two time periods. One is the present, one is 20 years in the future. And according to Aperture, everything should be working just fine with proper maintenance. But this is Aperture science we're talking about, so of course we've got improper maintenance going on. So 20 years of improper maintenance has caused the future version to have degraded significantly. Yeah, this is just time goes on. You don't take care of things, they fall apart. So you'll see some differences between the time periods here and there, like there might be a glass wall in the present that you can't pass through, but if you travel to the future, it's broken and now you can get through it. Or there might be some devices that are active in the present but inactive in the future. And then on occasion you'll see something a bit weirder, like a puzzle element, like a laser or light bridge that isn't active in the present but is active in the future for some reason. You can't really explain this just by things degrading. This would have to be Aperture deliberately setting up a time travel puzzle this way, which I don't know, maybe they did, but they couldn't take care of give it proper maintenance to keep things from degrading. So yeah, I don't know, but again, it's for the purpose of puzzle design. I can give it a pass. Now, the two time periods are also connected causally, where changes in the present will affect the future, but not vice versa. So let's imagine you've got your portal gun. You just set up a blue and orange portal in two places in the present. You set up your time portal, hop over to the future, and yeah, portals are still where you left them. Go back to the present, change one of them, go to the future. Oh, yeah, now it's changed. But of course, things don't go in the opposite direction. If you change where the portals are in the future, like you change your orange one to be over on that wall and go back to the present, oh no, orange one is still on that wall because of course time doesn't go in that direction. This all makes nice intuitive sense. And then things get a bit more complicated, like in the future, you've changed orange from front wall to left wall, let's say. You go back to the present, you put the orange on the right wall now, and you go to the future, now it's on the right wall, even though previously you turned it from the front wall to the left wall, but it should never have been on the front wall in the first place. So the last time you were in the future, it must have really been on the right wall, but you still turned it to the left wall since then, didn't you? Well, no, and this is where we get into a whole mess of maybe these are alternate timelines. How exactly does the time travel work? I'll get into that a bit later when we just talk about the time travel as a whole. Let's at least go through first how all the puzzle elements and stuff work so you understand everything the game is doing before we try to think about making sense of the time travel. So now let's talk about puzzle elements and the time portal. So let's say in the present you've got a laser emitter. You set up the time portal, redirect the laser, it shoots through the time portal, comes out in the future. You can also do this in vice versa, have a laser from the future go through a time portal, come out in the present. You also have the same laser, which is active in both the present and future. And let's say in the future, you set up the time portal and you can have it come out in the present. And now you've got two lasers in the present to work with. This is great for puzzles and fits in perfectly with the logic of time travel. You can do this with light bridges too, though other puzzle elements don't really work as well. Actually, yeah, light bridges and expulsion tubes work. Turrets, you're not really playing around with turrets through time portals. But cubes, however, cubes are where it gets a bit complicated. You can't simply take cubes through time portals. So let's say you're in the present, you have a cube, you have a time portal. Let's say you just put the cube down on the floor to start off. You go through the time portal. Oh, the cube is where you left it. It's degraded from time. Okay, come back to the present. Let's pick up the cube, take it with us through the time portal, and for some unexplainable reason, the cube disappears out of your hands when you take it through the time portal. Okay, that's weird. Well, the dispenser in the room gives us another cube. So we put it down on the floor, go to the future. What if we take a cube from the future back to the present? So we grab the future cube, take it through the time portal. Oh, this one works. Okay. So we have the future version of the same cube. Okay. So we go over there, and as we're walking by, we accidentally bump the present cube. And as soon as we jostle it, the future one disappears out of our hands. Just, we look back over into the future, and the future version of the cube is there again, right where we jostled the present cube to. So there is a causal connection going on, and basically whenever the present cube's position is updated, the future version of the cube is destroyed wherever it is in the future or present and recreated where you left the present version of the cube. But there are limitations, like for some reason you can't take the present cube through the time portal into the future. I'm not really sure why. This is the one criticism I have, that it wouldn't actually be helpful for anything. You can always just leave the present cube, go through the time portal, and pick it up, the future version of it, but you can't take it through the time portal with you for some reason. It wouldn't actually help you, but they don't allow you to do it, and it just bugs me. It's a quirk of the time travel. Now, there is one annoyance that comes out of things this way, is if you're in the middle of solving a puzzle, it requires you to have both the present version of the cube and the future version of the cube, both in the present timeline in different spots. And as you're doing it, oh, damn, I need to have the present version of the cube 1 inch to the left. So you go pick it up, adjust it, and the future version of the cube is now destroyed. You have to go through previous parts of the puzzle, redoing a lot of it just because you had to adjust that cube. And so a lot of the puzzles end up with you redoing sections of them again and again to get back to a previous state, which can be annoying, unfortunately. You can save your game if you think of it, if you're worried about messing something up, but that doesn't really help if you didn't get it in quite the right arrangement, because you will have to go back to the start, adjust things slightly, and then redo a lot. And I'm not sure there's really a good solution to this, but it is one unfortunate way the game design works. So it is one drawback. Oh yeah, and there's one other quirk with cubes that they seem to obey causality, but that does get a bit complicated if you use the cube dispenser in the future. Like, let's imagine you have a cube dispenser in the present, press the button, get out a cube, put it on the floor. Okay, go over to the future. You've got cube on the floor and a cube dispenser. So you go over, click the button on the cube dispenser, it destroys the old cube, Aperture doesn't want you to have two cubes, and gives you a new cube. Okay, so this cube you have now is a different cube from the one in the present. But if you go back to the present and move that cube, the different cube in the future will still be destroyed and updated, even though it's a different cube out of the dispenser. So I get why it works that way from a gameplay reason. And maybe it could be fixed by, not allowing cube dispensers to work in the future or designing puzzles that way. But it's a minor quirk, and you just have to keep in mind, okay, that's how the game has to work. Only one cube per chamber, even if you dispense a different one in the future. Now, overall, all of these behaviors of cubes are sensible enough for game design and feel intuitive enough to work with, but if we get back to thinking about how time travel works, they don't really match up with any real-world model of time travel. Yes, I said real-world model of time travel. So physicists, of course, do think about this thing, and surprisingly, there is one way time travel can work in the universe. It simply requires that time travel to the past never changes the past. They call these closed time-like curves. So if you want to learn more about it, just look up the term closed time-like curve. You'll find articles about how it could work in physics theoretically. It's just there's no practical way to arrange it. But if you did have time travel that didn't change the past, it wouldn't actually break any known laws of physics. That, of course, isn't what happens in Portal Reloaded. You'll remember from my digression earlier that if you go to the future once, see things one way, go to the present, change things, and go to the future again, you are changing your own past perception, because after you've changed things in the present, what you remember seeing in the future should have been different. So there is a way to change the past here. That is, the present relative to the future is, of course, the past. So we don't have a stable time loop or closed time-like curve model of time travel in this game. Okay, that's fine. Well, what's the next most sensible? So the next most sensible way you could do time travel in physics is a multiverse approach. That is, basically, whenever you time travel back to the past, the universe splits. The old timeline still exists, but you now exist in a new timeline. It basically spawns a parallel universe, and any changes you take place there won't affect the future you came from and cause a paradox. But the problem is this also isn't what happens in game. So, let's say you have a cube on the ground, you go through a time portal into the future, grab its future version, bring it back, careful not to touch the present one, you put the future one down beside it. So that future one comes from the original timeline, and you're now in a new timeline. Now, if you go jostle the present cube, what should happen is the present cube will only affect a future cube in this new timeline, but not the future cube in that old timeline. But in game, if you jostle the present cube, the future one gets destroyed. So the timelines still are connected and allow changes. And so in the end, it doesn't really fit with any logical model of time travel. But, again, I think this is fine for the game. A lot of this is necessary to make the game work. Like, if you did take a full multiverse approach, you could essentially use this to keep going into the future again and again and picking up more and more cubes and get an infinite number in the present and effectively break the game. Like, the game also has a limitation that if you leave the future cube in the present, you can't go back to the future and find a future version of the future cube, even though it should be there. Again, it's an acceptable break from reality. Although, when you put all of this together, there's a lot of holes in the way time travel works, and most of them probably necessary for the game to work. And if that really bothers you, here's what you can do. There's no actual time travel. This is just aperture science messing with your head. Thinking, how would a test subject respond to a perception of time travel? They just create copies of each room. The time portal connects you between the two copies, and whenever you move things around in the present version, they update the future version to match. They remotely destroy cubes as necessary to give you the illusion of time travel and all of that. So it's all just a mind game played by Aperture. Did that work for you? Well, anyways. So that's my discussion of the physics of the game. Let's talk about the gameplay itself. So the structure of the game is basically like the first half of Portal 1. Most of the game is in isolated test chambers. There are puzzles for you to solve, and then in between the test chambers, there are very brief walking segments kind of behind the scenes, on occasion with a minor little puzzle or place for you to navigate between. Not much, but it's a little bit of extra connective tissue that's nice, that gives the illusion of being in an actual complex rather than just disconnected test chambers. It makes it feel a bit more real and less gamey, so that's good. Now, as you play through, the puzzles in the game will start off simple. They limit your control over portals, just like in Portal 1 or Portal 2, gradually giving you more and more control as you learn about how portals work. And just, they now add in the time portal, and like at first you'll just have a fixed time portal on the wall. Then later you'll be able to create time portals in certain locations by pressing a button near them. And then finally, they'll upgrade the portal gun entirely so you can shoot time portals wherever you want. Just kind of ramping you in. But unlike the games, as soon as they've given you all the mechanics, the training wheels are completely off and all the puzzles immediately go to high difficulty. Now, this mod is intended for people who have finished Portal 2, so this makes sense. You don't want to go through the easy difficulty again when you just came off of the high difficulty at the end of Portal 2. So yeah, starting off at a high difficulty, at least after they've trained you on the time portal, that's reasonable. Just be aware of it going in. If you haven't played Portal 2 and are rusty on portal puzzles, you might want to go back to it or Portal 1, get a better idea of what's going on. Now, although the puzzles are initially difficult, the game still does gradually introduce new puzzle elements, so they don't throw too much at you at once. It brings over many of the elements that were in Portal 2, so in addition to the basic portals and cubes and switches, you have lasers, light bridges, turrets, and expulsion tubes, but you don't have the 3 special types of gel that were brought over in the latter half of Portal 2. Now, there actually is one game element that is brought back from Portal 1, which was dropped in Portal 2, and this element is timing. So, to give a bit of backstory, Portal 1 had a lot of puzzles that required you to shoot a portal in a short time interval. Like, for instance, if you were bouncing up through gravity, you might have to shoot a portal while you were still in the air, or you would have these big balls of electricity bouncing around the room, and you had to quickly shoot portals to line them up. Now, in making Portal 2, Valve decided to focus the game more on puzzles than on quick reflexes, so they removed or minimized all timing elements. So the bouncing balls were replaced with lasers, which would just shoot through a static path. This did limit some of the puzzles they could make, but as you saw, they were still able to make a ton of good puzzles. But also helped open up the game more to people who had struggled more with video games, didn't have the quick reflexes. They just had to take their time, slowly line up things, even if they were awkward with the controller, and fire the portals and go through when they were ready, without having to worry about quick execution. You didn't need to be a certified gamer TM to play the game. You just had to think about it and take your time. Now, Portal Reloaded, that is, does bring back the element of timing to some puzzles. It doesn't have the bouncing balls, but it does have cases where you have to have either yourself or a cube suspended in the air, bouncing through while you do other things. Like, there are puzzles where you have to shoot multiple portals while the cube is up in the air in a bounce between coming out of and going back into a portal. So if you're the type that you aren't familiar enough with games to be confident doing that, or you have more motor control issues that make it impossible to you, just know in advance, Portal Reloaded is going to have those types of puzzles. They come in maybe a third of the way through the game. I'd say. So you can get some enjoyment out of it playing it up to that, and since it's a free game, you don't lose much. There is a stage select in the game that you can skip ahead if you find one you can't do. Though the stage select does have the drawback, you can't select any test chamber. They're split up into blocks, like there are 25 chambers and 12 points in stage select that you can choose. So you can skip ahead a bit, maybe skip past the timing puzzles. So you can probably still get some enjoyment, but it will unfortunately hamper the experience if you aren't able to get things done quick enough. Now, it doesn't require a ridiculous amount of control. Like, a first-person game like this, a lot of people prefer to play on mouse and keyboard for very accurate and quick gun control, but I played through this whole game on controller, seeing as my mouse is, very clicky. And yeah, that was fine for me. I was able to line things up well enough on controller, so it's not hard timing for a good gamer, but if you aren't a good gamer or you have motor control issues, this probably isn't the game for you, unfortunately. Okay, so let's talk about the puzzle design themselves. So overall, I'd say the puzzles are well designed and fun to solve. They do get difficult, and they get difficult pretty quickly, and there were a few that had me thinking for quite a bit, taking half hour to an hour to solve, but I never had to give up. I was always able to figure it out on my own eventually. And the test chambers do try to help you out a bit. They have small icons placed around the room to hint at what you should do, which can help guide you if you're lost. And many test chambers also include numbered icons, which will help hint at the order in which you'll have to interact with various things around the room. So this is a good way of giving the player a bit of a nudge how to solve the puzzle without spoiling it for them. And there are other things, and like switches will have lines on the walls connecting to what they'll affect when triggered, letting you plan ahead what'll happen when you do something. On occasion, this can be a bit confusing, like you might see lines that don't obviously connect to anything. Or, one example that was frustrating, there was one hint which was off on a wall above a pool of acid, danger water, whatever it was. And so you couldn't walk right up to see what the hint was. The puzzle did have light bridges, but you couldn't get a light bridge particularly close to it either. So in order to figure out what that hint was, since I was getting stumped on that puzzle, I wanted to look at the hint for help. I had to put a light bridge as close as possible, then plug my laptop into my big screen TV, project the game on my big screen TV, get up out of my chair, walk over to the TV, lean my head in very close to it. Oh, that's what the hint is saying. So yeah, a bit of a design issue there. Like another time that was a bit confusing, the game had an invisible trigger that there didn't seem to be any way to get to the exit of the room, but what ended up happening is once you got on a platform close to the exit, the floor suddenly appeared in front of the exit. I was wondering throughout, okay, how am I going to solve that? And something like that could be a stumbling block. If you don't try to go ahead anyway, you might get stumped that say, well, I can do this and this and this, but I still won't be able to get to the exit. And so it's quite possible somebody could get stuck there because they don't know that the game is just wants you to get close to the exit, and then it'll create floor for you to go the rest of the way. But these are just two of the puzzles in the game. It's overall, the game is pretty good with this, so I'd say that the puzzles work well. Particularly when you consider this is one person making this mod. So compared to all the people Valve had working on and the polish they were able to get, this is great overall. Now, another thing I liked about the puzzles is that there are often multiple ways to solve a puzzle, and the game embraces this. It tries to restrict you to an intended solution, but it's not going to put its foot down and demand it of you. All it asks is you get to the exit, maybe having the few right switches pressed at the right time to go through it, and as long as you do, great. Now, even if you solve it in a completely unintended way, like most puzzles, seeing as you have two timelines, you can exit the room in either timeline to solve it, but all puzzles have one intended timeline that you're supposed to exit it through. But the game anticipates that maybe you'll be able to outthink it and exit a puzzle in the wrong timeline, and it's actually a step ahead. I did this once in my playthrough, and I was greeted with a custom voiced line in it acknowledging, oh, hey, you solved that puzzle in an unintended way. Good for you. And then there was this extra little gameplay segment. I was walking through the corridors between the test chambers. I got on the wall, it said, oh, wrong timeline. Please use this wall to switch to the other timeline and proceed. So it was a cute little addition that they saw ahead on that. Now, the game does have one notable limitation compared to Portal 2, and it's in the game's saving and loading system. So you can save your game, and you can load your most recent save, but you can't load any previous save. The game does keep track of you having previous saves. They're in the game saves folder, but in-game you can't access them. There's only an option to load your most recent save. So if you were making multiple saves while trying to solve a puzzle and you want to go 2 saves back, well, you can't do it. Or if you're recording it and lose some footage and want to go back to a save, no, you're out of luck. You either have to go to the stage select and play back up to that point, or you're out of luck. Or you do what I did and go into the save files, rename the file so that the save you want to load is called autosave. Then you go tell it, okay, now load my most recent wink save, and it'll load the previous save. Though for some reason this does cause a bit of debug text on the screen, but another save and reload fixes that. I don't know what's going on. Now, I think this is something the game designer tried to figure out, but it sounds like there's some limitation in modding that made this difficult. I don't know what's going on, but it's just one thing I'll note that's a bit of a drawback. Now, the game, as I mentioned, does have a stage select, and all of the stages are selectable at the beginning. You don't have to reach a stage before you select it, so you can go back to chunks, although for some reason it doesn't let you select any test chamber. It would have been nice if there were like one stage select for each test chamber. So if you get stumped on one chamber, said, I'll just go to the next one. No, you have to go forward to the next section and maybe skip a puzzle that you would have been able to solve. And this does help with the saving issue as well, or it could also help if you have motor control issues. You can skip over the timing section. All right, let's talk about the story of the game a bit. So this section, I'm not going to include any specific story spoilers, but I am going to spoil a bit how the game ends from a gameplay perspective. So if you don't want to hear any of that, skip ahead in a bit on the timeline, or I'll put a time code on the screen for you to skip ahead to. Okay? All right. So let's talk about the story. So the game has a story. I mentioned it's voiced in English. There's subtitles in English as well as many other language. I'm not sure how many it's up to like now, but it's like 8 or so. So if you're listening to this, you can probably hear English, but maybe you're reading the English subtitles, but you're not the best at English and would prefer a different language. Well, check out what's available on the store page. New languages keep getting added, so there's a good chance you'll be able to play it and understand the subtitles. But even if you can't, you can probably just mess around with the mechanics anyways and figure it out from a gameplay perspective. You might not be able to enjoy the story as much, but it's still enjoyable just from the gameplay. Of course, the game isn't driven by the story, but it is a nice bit of extra connective tissue. And there's also a bit of an extra puzzle of the story that you keep getting more and more clues as to what's going on. And so if you are paying attention to the story, you kind of get one bonus puzzle, piecing together what the story is actually about as you go along. Now, let's talk about the one problem I had, and this problem is with the way the game ends. The way the story is going, it heavily implies that after you finish the test chamber, something else is coming for you to do. And if you play Portal 1, when you finish the final test chamber, you're like halfway through the game. And Portal 2, you're not even a third of the way through the game when you get done with the first batch of test chambers. So, if it's following in those patterns, okay, there's something else. Maybe it'll be less. This is just made by one guy. But you go through, okay, final test chamber, let's see what we have, and, that was it. So the ending bit from a gameplay perspective is basically nothing. There were sections between previous test chambers that were more complex than what you get at the ending. So basically how the ending works, not spoiling the story, is you get a choice. You can do nothing, no extra gameplay, and get one ending. Or you can shoot a few portals, a total of exactly 3 portals, and the game even helpfully decides which portal you shoot. Like if you shoot the wrong type of portal, like you shoot one of the blue or orange portals when you're supposed to shoot the time portal, it'll override you and say, no, I think you meant to shoot the time portal here. And you shoot those 3 portals, and then you're through the final section and out of the game. So it's either no extra gameplay or shoot 3 portals. And that's all you get at the end. So it's kind of a letdown. The game builds you up to expecting to do something big, and then it's basically nothing. So it's a bit of a letdown. If I were advising the game designer on planning this out, I would say, okay, you're setting something up in this story, but you don't want to spend too much time working on it. I get it. So how about instead of working on this one final test chamber, you put that same amount of effort into a final non-test chamber story element. So the people who were expecting something at the end will get this extra something at the end. It doesn't have to be as long as Portal 1. It just has to be enough to be satisfying. And as it wasn't really satisfying at the end. So it was kind of a bit of a downer at the end from a story perspective and from what it had me expecting. And that's just kind of the trick. If you're going to disappoint people, you don't want the last note of the game to be disappointment. That's all it was. But there were other good things, like there actually was an animated sequence at the end, which I won't spoil. So there are some nice things. All right. So for those who watch along and those who skipped ahead to avoid any spoilers, this brings me to the conclusion of my Portal Reloaded review. So overall thoughts, I really enjoyed it. Now, of course, if you compare it to the game design and polish of Portal 2, Portal Reloaded being a mod made by one person, it comes up short, but it comes a lot closer than you would expect it to for a one-person mod. And, if you have Portal 2, this is free. It's very fun, so I strongly recommend you give it a try. So thank you, everyone, for sticking around and watching/listening to my review of Portal Reloaded. So I'm not sure what I'm going to have up next on the channel. I'm probably got a bit more Portal Bridge Constructor coming up, but it looks like my work schedule is going to be changing a bit soon. So I might have to cut back on the rate I'm coming out with videos. So I'll probably continue the Outer Wilds playthrough until that's complete. And after that, maybe I'll do things a bit more sporadically, or I'll see how things work out with the new schedule, what I can get in. So anyway, thank you everyone for watching, and I will see you all again later. Bye-bye. Thank you very much for watching, everyone. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, subscribe, and click the bell to be sure you get notifications of new uploads. See you again soon.